I feel like everybody should know what a fucking joke from the Idaho athletic department. You don't have the fucking stats put up yet. Lehigh beat you to that. How the hell do you not have that going? Brian,
it must be, it's hanging out with the game notes that were never published, right?
That were also never published.
Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubs of the Club, your University of Idaho affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brian Marceau, joined by Dallas Hammer. Dallas, I'm sure your voice sounds just as garbage as mine does.
I wish it did, Brian, but I am the throat goat, as people would say.
I thought that was Martin with the microphone.
Okay. Tubs After Dark, we are going way off.
Well, dude, the comment section already on fire. My man Ron Lowney saying Friday night will be here soon, and you know what is coming. You meant that with a U, right, Ron? So feel free to enjoy today's win as long as possible. Ron, noted Tubs of the Club fan, who's also a noted Montana State Bobcat. Why is Ron saying we should celebrate while we can? Guys, Idaho beat the shit out of Lehigh, which, hey, like, not shocking because that was kind of what we predicted. But, hey, the Vandals win 34-13 in a game that at the end, in the second half of the fourth quarter, it was the bench play, and Idaho was no longer trying to score the ball. But, hey, there's a little bit of football played between the first whistle and the bench coming in for Idaho. So, hey, Idaho – look, this was kind of a weird flow to the game because you look at total yards, like Idaho gains 410 total yards, Lehigh 374. You might think it was close. It was not. There are many ways where this could have been a 50-6 game, but Idaho gets on the board first. 5-yard touchdown pass by Jordan Dwyer thrown. Jack Lane kicked ass today, guys. First two scores for Idaho. Well, actually, first three scores for Idaho are Jack Lane touchdown passes. One the first quarter, Jordan Dwyer, like I said, for 5 yards. Another in the second quarter to Dwyer for 62 yards. In between those 2 touchdowns, Lehigh nailed a field goal. Congrats, guys. In the second quarter, then Mark Hamper, 42-yard pass from Jack Lane. Idaho's up 19 to 6 at the end of the first half. Then in the third quarter, Day Buchanan with a 2-yard touchdown run, capping a 9-play, 75-yard touchdown drive, makes it 27 to 6. Idaho's final touchdown came on a Zach Johnson 74-yard pick 6. Zach Johnson from Lake City High School, the pride of Coeur d'Alene. And that was pretty much all she wrote. By the way, the show presented by Tubbs Club. That means presented by Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. With that said, Dallas, there's a lot that went well today for Idaho. Where do you want to start?
I don't want to start with the crowd. That definitely didn't go well.
Well, we have a second half of the show we can talk about.
So we'll get
when Idaho beats the shit out of a team, like there isn't that much bad to talk about. So hey, we know our topic there.
So and we know where to circle the bad. So the nice thing is, now that I have quickly acknowledged bad, Bryan, almost everything else went phenomenal in this game. The only thing that is really almost devastating is, as Sam Buffington points out, was Zach's return a 74-yard return or a 69-yard return. Unfortunately, it was 74 yards. He was 5 yards away from having the nicest interception and touchdown of all time.
Well,
he really should have just take a knee on the 5, let one of the offensive guys get a touchdown. Like, come on, like Art Williams could have used one. Like, honestly, like Eli Cummings could have used one. Mark Hamper could have used another. Come on, Zach. Think of your teammates next time, and honestly, think of the jokes. But really, Bryan, Jack Lane is where I feel like I have to go with this.
Did anyone on the show say this needed to be a Jack Lane game?
No, I don't think so. Did they? Did you say that? And I'm just
yes, I did. Yes, I did. Anyway, continue.
Perfect. See, I didn't remember that because honestly, I think the Vandals led out by Brian Marceau probably still could have won this game because Lehigh was bad. But Jack Lane, 16 to 22, 318 yards, 3 touchdowns. Honestly, of those 6 incompletions, only one of them I can remember as being oh shit bad, because it's never good when you see Jordan Dwyer have to turn into the cornerback and try to bat the ball away from the corner that was about to intercept it. But Bryan, this Vandal offense throwing the ball, this is what I have wanted to see out of the Eck offense for years, and it's like what we have been talking about. James Aldridge in the comment section, speaking of Mark, who is apparently going by Marcus. So if there's anybody from the Hamper family or friends that are listening to this, please let us know if it's Mark or Marcus now, because they kept calling him Marcus over the PA, but we have not heard that before, and it still says Mark on the roster. So anyways, Bryan, this is what we've talked about for years, of like wanting the quarterback to just go find the open guy, uncork it for 40 yards if you have to, or hit the guy on the screen and just let him do the job. And honestly, that for me was maybe not the moment that I believe, hey, Idaho could really fight with anybody, but we're certainly on that path, because again, hitting Dwyer, there's like a 60-yarder that traveled about 40 yards in the air. Mark Hamper had a 42-yard reception that was about 4 yards in the air, and he just made it all happen. Like, Lane just found the right guy. And
it reminded me a lot of Lane against Idaho State in 2022.
Yes, 100%.
So yeah, hey, through the air, like you talked about the Jack Lane end, and yeah, Lane was fantastic. Like you said, exactly what this was the dude that both of us were not anxious at all about taking over for Giovanni McCoy, who, shocker, is in the transfer portal again.
We wish him the best, but yeah, he is no longer a Oregon State.
So I said Lane 16 to 22 for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. So hey, someone had to catch the ball, right? Jordan Dwyer, 7 catches for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, that's a day. And then Mark Hamper, five catches for 97 yards and a touchdown, as well as 1 rush for 1 yard. Yeah. So like, I mean, that was the story of Idaho offensively. Is we'll hit on it a little bit more in the second half, but like running game wasn't doing it today. Lehigh was actually fine on the ground defensively, better than some other Big Sky teams we've seen Idaho play for sure. But through the air, no, dude, Lane beat the shit out of Lehigh. And that was, again, like the final score was 34-13. It felt like Idaho could quite easily have gotten to 45-50 if they really put their foot on the gas.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, to very quickly interject, it was very obvious once Zach Johnson had the pick six, Idaho completely gave up is not the right word. But Idaho just gave up from that point on. We're like, yep, this game's over. We've won.
Janicek has always only cared so much about style points.
Yeah.
So, like, for him, like, okay, well, if you win by 20 or 40, who gives a shit? Like, you won the game. And Idaho got to put some guys who've been hurt on the bench to close the game. Big deal. That was one of the things we talked about on the show, right? It's like, hey, what's a win? Well, winning, but also not having this game not being questioned, letting some guys get rest. That absolutely took place for Idaho. So that's what went well broadly offensively is through the air. Lane was great. The receivers, particularly Dwyer and Hamper, were great as well. Defensively, Dallas, what went well?
I thought the pass rush was pretty outstanding for most of the night, Brian. By the way, I realize your tag still says president of the Bryan Harsin fan club. We should probably change that to president of the Bronco Mendenhall fan club. So I will get that corrected in post. But for me, Brian, it was the pass rush. I know the numbers don't pop off the screen. Keyshawn James Newby had the only sack of the night, but honestly, I think had Lehigh gone back to Dante Perry, the original starting quarterback throughout most of the year, and then the senior that got to play the final drive because the game was completely over. Had he been playing, I feel like this game might have been 50-3. Hayden Johnson honestly was outstanding. That kid could move. He scrambled out. He moved. He wasn't running bootlegs, but it looked like them because the pocket was collapsing pretty quick. I was really impressed with the Vandal pass rush. I loved that defensively. I hope that guys just continue to, get a little healthier as the weeks go by. But I thought that the bye week looked really good on Keyshawn James Newby. Again, the stats did not back it up. He only had 4 tackles, but I felt like he was this close to getting 4 more sacks last night.
Well, yeah, and the team as a whole, 6 TFLs. So, yeah, like you said, only 1 sack. But, I mean, there are 2 quarterbacks who played for Lehigh. Hayden Johnson. Hayden Johnson, I mean, that's his thing, is he moves. So, like, he's one of the guys who's going to be tough to bring down. But it clearly did not impact the game in any sort of meaningful way. I mean, through the air, Lehigh goes 17-31 on the game for 202 yards and a pick or a touchdown thrown to Idaho. On the ground, Lehigh 169 net yards on 42 carries, so like 4 yards per carry, but a ton of those yards came when the reserves were in. Not all, but mostly the yards came when the reserves were in. So, man, Idaho was good. Idaho was just solid. Now, I'm going to push back on one thing you said earlier. I don't think Lehigh was terrible, or was awful. I mean, Lehigh, I thought they were a disciplined team who were not as talented as Idaho. But I mean, for what Lehigh is, I thought they put in a reasonable effort. I mean, my main point of evidence here is, I mean, hey, it was 19-6. It was 19-6 at halftime. So, is that close? No. Is that getting your ass completely beat in like Idaho State when they played Idaho last times? No. I mean, I thought Lehigh put up more fight than that. So, I don't know. I mean, Idaho dominated both ends of the field in this game and when it mattered. And Idaho's in the final 8 again, guys. Yep. With all the dudes who left that again, if you're a Vandal who's deeply into this stuff following the show, you are not anxious about this. But Idaho lost a shit ton of really good players, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And worst case scenario, Idaho's going to finish exactly the same level they did last year. That's impressive.
After missing the starting quarterback for almost the entire year. And one thing I think is very worth pointing out, the Vandal defense, Brian, there's one other school in the country that held the Oregon offense to as few points as the Vandal defense did. Like, this is this is a hell of a squad that we had this year. And yeah, final 8, going on the road to the undefeated Bobcats next week. There's going to be time to talk about that next week and the fear of the season being over. But right now, if you're going to tell me that everybody transferred except for the offensive line, Jack Lane comes in at quarterback, immediately gets hurt, and then Idaho just runs through the gamut of every quarterback you possibly could. And then you still end up in the final 8 teams with the shit draw that Idaho got a handful of weekends ago. Man, I couldn't be happier with the season. Sean Kramer in the comment section, it's a successful season, all things considered. I'd like it to be more successful. Could not agree more on that. Very one small point I want a little bit of pushback on, Bryan. I said Lehigh is terrible because Lehigh scored 6 points until the final drive that didn't matter. They had, before that first field goal, they had 55 yards of offense. Like, yeah, their first 3 drives, or I guess the third drive was a 3 and out. Their first 2 drives, they converted 1 first down very quickly, and then Idaho, 3 and out after that. Like that first play or the second play was the first down play on the second possessions. But I thought Idaho looked like they outclassed Lehigh, and this is what
they did.
This is what I wanted to see out of the Vandals. We've seen a lot of close games this year, and a lot of times, especially in our Discord, which that's the whole purpose of a game thread, is to like overreact to things in the middle of the game. A lot of people have had a lot of concerns. Like, man, Idaho doesn't put anybody away. Idaho has played all these close games. Sometimes it feels like they play down to the opponent. Sometimes they play up, unless it's Montana State, obviously, because that was kind of ugly. This, to me, Bryan, was domination in 2 of the 3 phases of the game. Special teams was, again, a wild ride tonight. But, man, offensively and defensively, Idaho pretty much brought it. Outside of the running game, didn't look quite as good. But Idaho brought it, man. And that's what I want to see. Like, I know Lehigh, we talked about how, they're not quite the same quality of opponent. Idaho got really lucky with the way that this landed. But, hey, they still made it into the playoffs. They still won a playoff game. You only control who you play. You can't control who you can play. You control how you play against them. They beat the shit out of them from start to finish, man.
Yeah, I don't.
Very last thing in the comment section. Simon Miller, game threads are emote posts. 100% what they're for. Today felt in hand for the entire game. That's what it felt like. From start to finish, Idaho had this in the bag.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to hit that you referenced for Keyshawn James Newby to quantify it. He also did have 3 quarterback hurries. So like he was close quite a few times. So Idaho has not scored fewer than 31 points since October 12th at Montana State. So no, dude, offensively, things are humming. I just have to, I know we say this a little bit whenever we, with the last handful of games, but just because of the ride this season has been, Jack Lane is so fun to watch. Look, and hey, other guys took care of business too, like Dwyer and Hamber for sure. Don't want to ignore that part. But just the way Lane, he doesn't have to beat teams just one way. Like he can pick teams apart, Jesus Christ. He can pick teams apart, with a lot of short, intermediate passes. Or then you have what happened today, where he had a couple bombs to Jordan Dwyer that just broke the back of Lehigh. So just, knowing that Lane, if needed, as needed, can beat teams in whatever way they're going to give Idaho, because every team's going to give up something, right? And Lane, it doesn't need it to just be one thing, man. So just goddamn fun to watch. We have to talk about the other half of the game too. And hey, Treep Talk saying, old man Marcel left his ringer on. I actually had a different box score up and then was closing my phone and actually hit something on a goddamn ESPN Plus piece of shit ad that started. So my bad, guys. I will not be editing that out later. Before we get to the other half of the discussion, which will be probably on the shorter end because not that much went wrong in kicking Lehigh's ass. Snake River Stampede Canadian whiskey, guys. It's a double barrel finish for either whiskey, whether it's a Stampede or the 1915. I'd say win the playoff game. Grab yourself a 1915 small batch. It's a 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley, Canadian whiskey, double barrel finish, and first fill bourbon, then finish an ex-Canadian rye whiskey cask at $38.95. It's a premium Canadian whiskey that's not premium priced, but it is truly one of the two best Canadian whiskeys you're going to grab in Idaho State Liquor Store. The only one that I'd really compare is if you just happen to like the double barrel finish of the Stampede, which is finished in Oloroso sherry casks instead, better. Can't go wrong either way. Grab yourself a Snake River. Dallas, other than my phone, what didn't go as well for Idaho today?
Oh, Bryan. What the fuck are we going to do about this fan base? I, for one, am a huge fan of hearing the dull roar of the student section on third and medium when the Vandals have the ball. It's my favorite thing. It's been going on for 30 goddamn years. Just never ends. So that sucks. Attendance was announced at 73.46. That also really sucks. Honestly, I'm embarrassed. I know that, weather is not super great and a lot of people have to come from Boise, but the student section, I know it was graduation, but I know that the vast majority of the undergrad class did not graduate in December. I know that for a fact. So that sucks. That man, if you're Jason Eck, how does that feel seeing that you have built this incredible 3-season run and people are now attending the playoff games less? I hate that. Absolutely hate that. It makes me sick as somebody who doesn't care as much about the tailgating and the experience. I'm there for the game because I'm a weirdo. That sucked. And then this also, Bryan, I'm going to take both of the main points here and then just let you to react to them. This is like the hitting off of a T-ball tee, but special teams was bad again. Just, maybe not bad. Bad's not the right word because Andrew Marshall did have one pretty nice punt return, but missed PATs. There's always that fear of, oh shit, why is that punt returner? Oh, Lehigh just returned that punt 30 yards. Only had one more guy to beat. Special teams, not the same without Thomas Ford.
Yeah, I want to start with the attendance. Because to me, that was kind of the big one. Now, before I hit the big part of attendance, the one positive I'll say about attendance is the people who showed up were a little bit more on the rowdy side.
Yes.
This is the type of, I wish that we could get 11 to 14,000 people who are rowdy like this. Because the energy of this 7,000 and change was vastly superior to the Eastern Washington game, where we had around 14,000.
And then
it was honestly
13,000 we've ever
had. Was honestly vastly superior to most of the games for me this season at home. Now, would just say for the people who showed up, you more than did your job and you did your best to make up for the many people who did not show up. So if you were there, pat yourself on the back for that. You hear my voice sound like garbage, guys. I did my best to make up for that. I'm going to go to Jason Eck on this one. Here's I believe this from the press conference. I'm stealing from John Mallory, friend of the show from KTIK, aka Johnny Ballgame, reading a tweet of his. Yes, I call it tweets. On attendance tonight at the Kibbe Dome being under 8,000. Last year we had over 9,000 for these playoff games. Our team's not regressing. We can't have our fan base regress. That's Jason Eck. Yeah, I don't know what I'm irritated as hell because here's my thing. We now this was big in the hashtag Only Tubs Discord this past week, but we know about a certain guy interviewing at a certain place. If you join the hashtag Only Tubs Discord, you can find it. So if you're a person who's usually anxious about hey, we have a great coach, how long is I going to stay? One of the things we have going for us to keep Jason Eck longer is just the actual industry of college football is not grabbing FCS coaches for head coaching positions right now. What they're having to do are things like what Jay Hill, who apparently chose to not take Utah State, did, which is go be defensive coordinator somewhere, or what guys like Jeff Choate had to do, leave Montana State, go be a defensive coordinator at Texas, and then get a head coaching job. That is kind of the pathway most guys, or is it Matt Entz who left
Matt Entz took the linebacker job
at USC and then got the Fresno job.
Yeah.
So hey, they have to do something at a Power 5 school to look a little more sexy, which is to say hey, if that's the reality, then for Eck to make a jump up, he might have to leave for a coordinator position. I think he likes being head coach, but I think a thing that could push a guy like Eck to decide on leaving sooner rather than later is feeling like, okay, like the fan base isn't actually as into it as I thought they were. Like it was novel for a year, and now they're relaxed and they think that's just how everything goes. I was pissed at the number of people who showed up. I was happy at the energy of the people who showed up. So like, hey, do keep that in mind. But Idaho, come on. Like, I know the city of Moscow isn't a big sports city, but there's a good number of cities that are easily drivable. Hell, we're recording at 12:39 it's early Sunday morning. I live in Coeur d'Alene, and I had to also drop off family members elsewhere. So I essentially had to drive 2 hours to be able to make it like on the return trip, which is a kind of like long way of saying like, it's not that big a deal. Like I'm still talking about a game I went to and drove back 2 hours from. Other people can do that.
And nope. I do want a very quick caveat. We are preaching to the choir here. Obviously, the people that are listening to this show, live at 12:39 in the morning, are Vandal diehards that were either at the game or unable to attend the game because they were far away. Or if you're listening to this on podcasts later in the day, you're probably not the casual person that's like, oh, hey, Vandals have a playoff game in December. That's cool. Maybe we should check it out. You probably already knew. Anyways, continue. I'm off my soapbox.
So anyway, James Aldridge saying Jack Hatton needed to get the fundraiser for student tickets started earlier. That may have helped students show up. Why was that Jack Hatton's job? That's not a pushback on James. Why was that not like an athletic department thing? Like there weren't even game notes published for this. So like it's a multi-level thing of the school itself. Dallas.
If you don't want Jason Eck to leave for another school, a really good way to do that is to not promote your game at all. Because maybe she thought nobody in the world would know Idaho had a playoff game.
Yeah, I don't know. Like that's been like we were talking about in our Discord, frustrated about like, hey, why in God's name is Idaho not promoting this? Fans need to show up too. And yeah, I know, like I do enunciate this to some of our listeners in Boise. It's different if you're in Boise and the weather sucks and you've made 5 other trips. We understand that. So like, hey, if you're like a Boise area Vandal and you can't make it, I got it. Idaho's a big state. There's a lot of cities and towns in the northern half of the state that could have made it to this game. So the fan base can't be so goddamn fickle.
As James Aldridge pointed out, Bryan, 600 undergrads or 600 grads today. Last I checked, there were over 10,000 students in campus.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were 2 game notes posted for the men's basketball game for Idaho going to Oregon State and then losing at Oregon State. No game notes posted. To even look up this and be able to talk about defensive stats for this game, we had to go to the Lehigh page. Idaho didn't get this done. So, yeah, it's annoyed about a lack of promotion of the football game from the institution, but also annoyed at just the fickle part of the fan base that like, this is the good old days, guys. I'm not trying to get away from the game itself, but this is the reality of college athletics today in 2024. When things are going well, no matter the sport, it can change in a goddamn instant. If you have something going, you should cash in. The people who went today cashed in, and they again did their best to make up for those that didn't show up. But god damn it, I don't know how to fix that part of the fan base. I don't.
Again, and so hitting the comment section very quickly, James Aldrich doesn't help that the communications department is one man strong right now. So yeah, that certainly does not help. But again, that's also, hey, Idaho, get people hired, and if you're not getting them hired, find a way in the budget to make that job palatable for somebody. I've seen what people get paid and the hours that is. I mean, I respect the hell out of the people that do that, because I used to be in media and I got paid about that, and it's long hours. It's thankless work. It's rough. James Aldridge, again, UI not hiring someone to fill an athletics job that's been open since before October is ridiculous. Also agree. Max Antouche, wait, the athletic department fumbled again? Also, yep. Simon Miller, AD fail. Students should show up regardless, but it does need to be better. Like, athletic departments that give a shit are typically the ones that are able to get people going time and time and time again. This has been an Idaho problem for 30 years, Bryan.
Yeah.
We know what the good old days are because we don't have very many of them. We haven't had a whole lot of them in my lifetime. This is it right here, right now. And I promise you, if Jason Eck leaves within the next month, the athletic department is going to fuck it up. And whoever comes in after him, if it's Dan Jackson getting promoted and they don't keep the rest of the assistants, or they look elsewhere and bring someone else in, the chances of them nailing that hire like they did with Jason Eck is 0 to 1%. Vandals do not have a history of successful athletics. If you have a friend or family in New Mexico, check in on them and see how New Mexico State football is doing after, they hired a coach that had a whole bunch of heart problems and got out of coaching, decided, I want to come back. New Mexico State, let's do it. They go to 2 straight bowl games, have the 2 best seasons in program history. He's gone. Program completely collapses because guess what? Their athletic department had no idea what the hell they were doing. Same thing that's going to happen here. So it sucks to see, like, there's no buy-in from the athletic department understanding we have one of the most charismatic dudes in college football. He's on our sideline. People love him. He's well over 3 bills, closer to 4. Coach Eck, I don't know what your weight is, but like everybody loves it. You're the big jolly guy that has a love of trick plays and getting kind of weird with it. Like, it works. It's and awesome.
Wins a shit ton of games.
Fun. You win a ton of games. The internet loved Idaho for the couple FBS games that made it kind of viral when Idaho almost took out the number 1 team in the country and then went and beat Wyoming with a backup quarterback. People loved that. And the athletic department was never able to capitalize on it. And that's not like, I don't mean that to sound like I'm taking shots at like the people that are in there right now. This is a long-standing problem of this university. It has been like this for my entire life. Simon Miller, this is the most depressed I've been after a playoff blowout win ever. Yeah, sorry we're raining on the parade here, guys, but on the field, this was one of the best Vandal games I've ever been to.
Kick-ass game.
When you have to take away the negatives, what are the negatives? Man, this is such a fair weather fan base. We saw how dead the dome was when Paul Petrino killed it. 7,300 people for a playoff game, and there were a ton of Lehigh people there.
It's actually kind of a shocking number of Lehigh people there.
Yeah, from traveling all the way from Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
like respect. But man, again, this could turn into a 3-hour discussion about Moscow, Idaho in general. Is a terrible location to have college football. I love Moscow, and all of us do. It's not easy to get to Moscow. It's not easy to get hotels in Moscow.
That's the big,
It's just not, it's not a great place for this. You have to be very dedicated to it. And as Ron says in the comment section, sell yourselves. And that is something that is just not, it just doesn't happen. It never has. I don't think it ever will, which means if you like Vandal football, you've got to be the person getting your friends and family interested in it, because otherwise the athletic department's not going to do it. They haven't for years, decades.
Yeah, I do think we need to yank the wheel back to the games in front of us. With the other takeaway, like special teams was not fantastic. My other thing I'm going to add is Idaho could not run the ball against Lehigh.
Which felt kind of by design.
No, it was not. Like they did that. Look, Idaho on the game averaged 2.8 yards per carry. Like,
I meant
there's
by design by the Lehigh defense.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, no. Right. Sorry. Jason and I went into this with the game plan. We are not going to average above 3 yards a carry.
I've been on this show when it was hosted differently and we would pretend certain things happening. So my bad. That's my PTSD. No, like Lehigh did sell out to stop the run, but they did stop the run. And look, Idaho's playing a radically better defense next week in Montana State. So I think it's fair to say running back room was as healthy as it's been in a long time. Everyone but Nate Thomas was available today, and Idaho just simply could not run the football. Now, the good news is Idaho didn't just run it 1,000 times. Like, this wasn't a Bobby Hauck game. Idaho just changed up, and Jack Lane's good, man. So Jason Eck's been like this since he's been here day one. Do what works, pick up wins. That's what they care about. So there isn't really a care about a ratio of runs to passes in my mind. It's okay. Well, if Idaho's not going to run, we're going to beat the hell out of them through the air. That's what Idaho did. But because we do have another game next week that we do want to pay attention to. I mean, I thought the offensive line was mostly solid. They gave Jack Lane. Jack Lane was sacked once, but other than that, Lane had time in the pocket, so the pass protection was strong. But hey, Montana State's going to be tougher against the run than Lehigh was, and Idaho could not run versus Lehigh. I think that's a fair thing to say. Did not go as well. Before we get to players of the game, Dallas, I need you to take us on a trip away from the one we were on, talking about attendance, and take us on a trip somewhere else.
Bryan, we are going right into our backyard where you could get a great all-inclusive week-long vacation. Just reach out to Hughes River Expeditions. They've been Vandal owned and operated since 1976. Again, if you're looking at the website, it says family owned and operated since 1976. All of those people look like they are having an absolute blast. The boats say Hughes. You kind of know what's going on here. They will take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Again, look at these happy people. I haven't felt happiness like this, well, probably ever in my actual whole life. But anyways, that's not the point. Look at this. These people are thrilled. You've got multi-day trips like the one down the middle fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of no return, the Salmon River Canyons, the Selway. Bryan, there's the Perstead meteor shower you could check out. And there's also the pristine bitches, man. It's a great place to go. All you got to do is call Colin 406-540-4450. Again, 406-540-4450. There's the beaches. There's amazing whitewater. There's trails to hike. There's wildlife to see. There's hot springs you can soak in. And again, you can fish in the most remote stretches of river in the entire country. If you're looking for a great week-long vacation, just right here in the Gem State, grab a paddle, catch dinner, and give Colin a call. HughesRiver.com, 406-540-4450. Bryan, I have a question for you. Immediately after this game, my brain went straight to Montana State. And I don't want to get into a huge discussion about that because we have another show for that. Leaving the Lehigh game, do you feel better or worse about the Montana State game than you did a week ago?
I feel a lot better. I feel Idaho defensively. Look, one of the narratives, the things you and I disagreed on a little bit towards the end of the season was how to interpret Idaho defensively. Where, hey, there were some close games against some good offensive teams, but not great overall teams. Where I said, hey, I just think the defense isn't going to be as strong as we hoped from earlier. And you said your general takeaway was, hey, dude, like they were kind of based in the first half, but then they shut them down in the second half. Care about the second half, man. Like that's kind of the design. This was a complete game by the defense. So I'm feeling better about that end for Idaho. But the other thing is, if you're going to beat Montana State, you have to be able to stretch the field. There is absolutely no other way to do it. You have to be able to challenge their secondary. They're too strong up front for a team like Idaho, at least, to beat on the ground. I mean, obviously, like the only team that was effective on the ground against Montana State this year was UC Davis, Ellison, and he's should have been Walter Payton Award winner. Okay, so like that kind of matters. Idaho being able to Lane doing it again and again and again. Since he's been healthy, does make me feel a lot better about that game because you go back and you look at that Montana State Idaho game. There were a few moments that could have, I'm not saying it would have pushed Idaho over to a win. Like Jack Wagner missed a couple passes that would have turned that from a blowout to like, okay, this is interesting as far as like overall outcome. I think Jack Lane can put up points because you just have to put up points against Montana State. It doesn't matter how good you are defensively. Even the team like UC Davis, who did well against Montana State, the Bobcats still scored 30. If you want to beat Montana State, you got to be able to hang around 30 on them and then also limit them defensively. So, yes, both boxes are checked today I think Idaho's developed a ton in the past, not only by the fact of having Jack Lane there, But I think we're watching Jack Lane develop in front of our own eyes. He hadn't played that many games, and then he got hurt in week 1. So the development curve is really weird for Lane, but I don't know. Every week I like him a little bit more. So I feel better about it. I'm assuming you certainly can't feel worse.
No, goodness no. I mean, don't get me wrong. The lack of success in the run game, and the lack of just honestly push and domination that I was expecting from Idaho's lines, that gives me a little bit of a pause, because Montana State has been building the trenches for years and is, again, at the moment, the one team in the Big Sky that's proven to be able to compete with the top of the MVFC. So that scares the shit out of me. But then again, seeing what Jack Lane did, like, man, if Idaho can keep him upright and don't let the game get away from them in the fourth quarter. I know Tommy Malott had a great game. Thank you, Ron, for posting the stats so I didn't have to go look them up. 22 for 25 today, 300 yards and 4 touchdowns.
That's a game. That's a game.
That's a pretty damn good game. Jack Lane, 16 to 22, 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, and again, watching it on the field where it's like, oh man, Dwyer just broke open. Oh, that ball's already in the air. He knew it. Boom. There's enough there that if Idaho can keep that game close into the fourth quarter, I do believe Jack Lane might have what it takes to slay the Bobcats. So we'll get into that obviously in the preview show next week. But I did leave this game feeling better about next week. I'm obviously, we've talked about it on the show. Idaho getting to the Final 8 is a successful season. Sean Kramer mentioned it in the comment section. Successful season. I think there is a chance. Idaho has given me the belief it can happen. Am I saying it's going to happen? No. But with Lane back there, if he's upright and healthy that whole game and it is close in the fourth quarter, man, I don't know that I'd bet against the guy.
No, and like, hey, Nick McIver in comment section, Hampers breakout second half of the season makes me feel better too. I mean, Idaho has two all Big Sky level receivers catching Lane's passes. So no, there's more stats that I want to talk about that I think are going to influence how we understand what Idaho needs to do on Wednesday. Player of the game offensively, Dallas.
I just spent the last 45 seconds talking about how I think he's the reason Idaho could win next week. It is Jack Lane, and I'm sorry for stealing that if that was where you were going. But it was Jack Lane. It was the same thing that we said, over in the offseason, and we've been saying it for years at this point. Like, man, Jack Lane might steal this job from Giovanni McCoy, a Jerry Rice Award winner, just because of what we've heard about what he can do. And this was the culmination of it to me, Brian. Jack Lane is the dude. If Jack Lane didn't have the local connection of, I believe his dad went here.
Stepdad.
Thank you. Stepdad went here. He's from Oregon, grew up rooting for the Ducks. If you're not get recruited by Oregon or Oregon State, I mean, looking across the border is a pretty good place to go if you want to stay in the area. This was the culmination of, wow, if this guy had a little bit bigger arm, I don't know how much longer he'd be at Idaho. Honestly, if people are watching the tape, I don't know how much longer he should be at Idaho, because there's not a lot of quarterbacks that can do what he does, especially at this level. But even in college football, completely, man, he stands in the pocket and nothing seems to faze him. He's just in there, finds the right guy, and gets the first down. And that's what I want out of a quarterback. Loved what I saw to Jack Lane today.
I was about to say, like, the season stats he has from ESPN. All right, Idaho's got a box score posted. It's a good thing we were bitching about this.
Brian, they were listening to Tubbs. They heard us bitch about it. They fixed it.
Yeah, that's clearly
that's how it worked. For sure.
Yeah. No, dude, like Jack Lane's a guy, but like to cover someone else, Jordan Dwyer is the only other person you'd go for offensively. 7 catches, 166 yards, and 2 touchdowns. For all as much good things as we said about Lane, which mean every one of those two, Jordan Dwyer had a kick-ass game. Lehigh had no answer for Jordan Dwyer. And one, you did reference, Jordan Dwyer made a very important defensive play in saving an interception. but also, I mean, he beat Lehigh deep. He beat him short. No, the drops from earlier in the season are completely gone from this Idaho team overall. And Dwyer is making a case for should have been first team All Big Sky as a wide receiver.
What a robbery. What a robbery. Just Mark Hamber should have been the freshman of the year. Just saying.
Yep. And anyway, Patty Frakes and Dwyer made several insane catches in that game. Yeah, he also made like a really nice catch that didn't count as a catch because he was knocked out in the air and landed on his back pretty damn rough, but still came down with the ball. So,
and then very next time he got on the field, 62-yard touchdown.
God damn it. Yeah. So no, like if it's not Jack Lane, it's Jordan Dwyer, but it's Jack Lane. Defensive player of the game.
I'm going to go with a slightly different one than what I am assuming you're going to go with. Keyshawn James Newby. Again, the box score does not necessarily explode. He had the 1 tackle for loss, which was the sack. Had the 3 quarterback pressures, which did certainly lead the team. But I thought he looked like he was possessed out there. Honestly, you could have told me that he had 7 sacks and I would have believed it. Like he disrupted everything that the Lehigh offense tried to do. Yes, Hayden Johnson, true freshman quarterback, starting his 4th game ever. Probably not going to beat a pretty seasoned Idaho defense at this point. But without KJN doing what he was doing, man, I'm going to miss that guy. He is so much fun to watch. I still can't believe his story. It's crazy. Hope we see him on Sundays next year. That's my player of the game. I know it doesn't show up as much in the box score, but man, I thought he was the disruptor tonight. Pay no attention to the cat scratching the door in the background. Sorry if you guys can hear that.
I can't hear that, but now I can see it, and it's kind of funny to look at for the viewers. Listeners, this is a complete waste of time for.
Yes, complete waste of time. He's actively getting into the closet door behind me.
Yeah, see, Patty Frakes is stealing what I was looking at. He says DTs deserve it as a group. Chikari, Afalava, and Krotzer all had great games. That's kind of where I am. I mean, one, I do want to point out Zach Johnson, 2 TFLs and a pick 6. That's a game. So, like, hey, Zach Johnson, great game. But Idaho dominated up front, and yeah, like you said, like Jakari Larmond and Zach Krotzer combined for 14 tackles. That's so that's
pretty good.
Yeah. That's honestly, that's where I'm going to go. Although I do want to add into that group because I just want to say up front, Jackson Eck had another kick-ass game. Yes. 11 tackles, first team All Big Sky linebacker. Jackson Eck was good.
Chief of nepotism, if you ask the jungle.
Yeah, the jungle who is very busy not playing games in December.
And very busy not responding to anybody on Twitter anymore. Yeah. Jackson Eck. And shout out to Jackson Eck. Returned to kick today, too.
Oh, yeah, he did, man. That was hysterical because he's still, like, I mean, Marshall was ready to take that.
He was going to get there, too.
No, like, maybe the good news for Jackson Eck, like you and I joked about this, is like, hey, maybe next season we get the Idaho impersonation of Travis Hunter and it's Jackson Eck as a linebacker and tight end. Sign me up.
I mean, that would be called Mike Rabel for those that are NFL diehards. But I would love to see Jackson Eck get a little bit of play in the tight end room. The guys haven't quite popped the way that we wanted. I know, like, Chance Bogan was a name that we were like, man, really super high on, and he just hasn't made it onto the field yet. Again, tight end's also a little bit different position because you got to learn the routes you got to run, plus be very intricately involved in the blocking schemes of the offensive line. So it's a harder position to get into for sure. Hopefully we see some of those. There's so many tight ends in this roster that just don't see the field. Hopefully we see those young guys really developing over the next year or two. But man, if not, I would love to see Jackson Eck catch a couple passes out there because honestly, pretty impressive hands and pretty impressive speed for a returner.
Patty Frick saying, hey, he was a high school running back, so maybe I got this wrong. We need Jackson Eck to bring back the fullback. He can be the Idaho Mike Allstott.
There we go. I like that with the neck roll back there too. Yes, let's bring back big boy football. James Aldrich, I'm not going to acknowledge that comment because I hate the Patriots with all of my heart. Because
what we will acknowledge, though, is patreon.com/Tubs Club to support the show. And if you want to, especially for the road game next week, because look, there's only going to be so many tickets available. If you can't go to Bozeman, or if you don't have like $7,000 for a night at a Bozeman hotel, then patreon.com/Tubbs the Club, the best place to chat Idaho sports online, bar none. And especially game days, the thread is going wild, wire to wire. And okay, I got to say this again, because I met like 10 new people today at the game from the Discord. It's another thing, like, hey, get involved in the Discord. You're going to start meeting more people at the games, which makes the games more fun. So, yeah, patreon.com/Tubbs the Club. It costs as little as a cup of coffee a month. If you want it to cost more, though, like I'm completely open to it to keep my liquor cabinet full. I mean, to keep the lights on.
James Aldrich with well, actually, Nick Weber. He could be the Idaho Caden Ellis. Oh, I love that. Actually, I could see that. Actually, that feels like that would work in black and pride gold. I feel like that would work. Shout out to my own comment, Corey Toomer 2.0. If anybody remembers the real dark days of the end of the Aki era, when the conference realignment completely screwed Idaho for the first but not last time, because again, why have an athletic director that could fix things in the short term rather than just tell everyone where college football was going to be in 25 years? Maybe trying to be prepared for it rather than just saying what was going to happen. Anyways, James Aldrich, Jackson Eck, triple option TDs would probably help me sleep better at night. Only if Mark Hamper is also involved in that triple option. We have to make sure that the running backs and wide receivers are getting handoffs and receptions, and maybe once in a while throwing the ball, because hey, we got to keep people engaged, because obviously just going out there and playing vanilla football and beating the shit out of a team to go to the final 8, that's not enough. So Bryan, maybe that's what Idaho should be focusing on. More receiver passes, more linebacker touchdowns. Let's get weird with it. Maybe that'll get people in the stands. Anyways, Simon Miller, TATC has mostly cured my PTSD. I don't know if I can ever be cured of that. Honestly, it's like herpes. It just never goes away. But someday we will forget about him when he's hopefully coaching the Grizzlies in a couple years. Bryan, we are well past 1 a.m., 2 a.m. for those of you in the southern and central parts of Idaho. We have gone completely off the rails with Tubbs After Dark tonight.
Wait. I was kidding.
It was mostly me, but yeah.
I was kidding. So, hey, you talked like a broad takeaway already. Like, hey, do you feel better about the Montana State game? We both said yeah. So, any other takeaways you have from tonight?
Man, I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, and we've talked about it. I don't know how many times on this damn show. If you are not, damn it, never mind. That's how we're ending this. James Aldrich, time to get back on the right track, y'all. Thank you, James. Thank you for being a longtime listener who gets our jokes. Guys, we're just going to call it now, and we're going to get to our broad takeaways maybe at the start of...
I do want to hit one thing. Idaho is 6-0 at the Dome.
Sweet Dome, baby.
Yeah, absolutely incredible home season. For those who made it, it was a kick-ass home season. Glad everyone did. I, for a long time, have on the season, have said Idaho making a Final 8 to me is this team actualizing what I think the ceiling is. And we'll talk about that Final 8 game next week. But today's a good day of Idaho, in spite of a lot of rough shit going on this season. In spite, about the injuries. We know about young guys having to step up. We know there's not a single senior on the offensive side of the ball. We know injuries absolutely decimating this team in certain ways. We talked about Jack Lane. We've brought up, I will bring it up again and again. Injuries stole the Buck Buchanan Award from Keyshawn James Newby, because through that out of conference play, there was no one in the country nearly at his level. He still has more than 10 sacks on the season. So, hey, not trying to pretend he's not doing anything. He is still quite productive and a very good edge rusher. But this Idaho team transcended a lot of difficulty, and team deserves every bit of credit, every bit of support you can give. That's from the players, of course, who are actually doing it on the field, to the coaching staff who had to manage. To me, what the injuries were just a goddamn nightmare to manage this year. We've followed football in the show for a while. we know every team deals with injuries to some extent. What Idaho had to handle this year was a different kind, and the coaches handled it pretty damn well. Final 8 appearance, 6-0 at home. It's hard to do better, guys.
Yeah. Bryan, you're preaching to the choir. Like, guys, this is the good old days. And I know that the people listening to this podcast are all the folks that are in agreement with us. There's a small section of the Vandal fan base that we connect with, and there's a whole bunch that probably don't know about us. And then there's certainly a large section that don't like us. But we are correct here. These are the good days, guys. The good days don't last forever.
This is going to be one of the seasons that I remember for a long time. Yeah. And honestly, like, I know this isn't the end of season show, but in some ways now I think of this season as more successful than last season. All things considered, that they're ending up in the worst case scenario. 2024 Idaho is going to finish in the exact same slot as 2023 Idaho. That's an astounding achievement. That this the entire team, from red shirts to Jason Eck himself, give those guys a pat on the back. You see them, tell them job well done, guys.
Yeah. Honestly, this is probably the most proud year I have had of being a Vandal football fan, because this team went through some shit and still got here and is getting stronger at the end instead of what we saw last year, which was certainly the opposite. So, man, V's up and go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
This is producer Bryan doing a terrible job of even finding what we're going to play us out with. So we're just going to call it good. See you guys Tuesday.